About money and politics. Go ahead and say it.
Okay, the only problem with money in politics is that it leaves most of us out, and it creates a poverty of spirit in the whole nation. And unfortunately, it takes a long time for that to be recognized, what buying elections really costs us. It costs us our spirit, our soul. It damages our culture. I want an America where everyone has an equal voice, not just the money interests. It's not about right and left. It's about right and wrong. And it is not ever going to change until we are resigned and committed to saying, enough, no more corruption in politics. With courage is a majority. I think we need to be reminded of that, particularly today.
Just in case you're still wondering if our system is rigged, oh yeah, it is. If you spent any time driving around America recently, you may have noticed that an awful lot of the country seems to have shriveled up and died. Take a trip on Route 2 in Maine sometime and count the boarded up paper mills and abandoned houses you see. Or head down Route 23 in Michigan or Ohio and consider the empty factories ringed with barbed wire. You'll see a lot of them. Outside the coastal cities, scenes like this are everywhere. This is your country now. Shuttered car dealerships next to defunct restaurants, across street from thrift stores and methadone clinics. That's America. Community after community, desiccated. So what happened? Well, a lot of things happen. Some of them are complicated and hard to change. But one of the big factors in this slow-moving disaster is the utter transformation of the way our leaders think about the American economy. Your average finance mogul looks at workers merely as cost to be reduced or eliminated entirely. Private equity isn't building a lot of public libraries these days. Instead, the model is ruthless economic efficiency. Buy a distressed company, outsource the jobs, liquidate the valuable assets, fire middle management, and once the smoke is cleared, dump what remains to the highest bidder, often in Asia. It's happened around the country. It has made a small number of people phenomenally rich. One of them is a New York-based hedge fund manager called Paul Singer, who, according to Forbes, has amassed a personal fortune of more than $3 billion. How has Singer made that money? The practice is called vulture capitalism, feeding off the carcass of a dying nation. In some ways, it's not so different from what Singer and his firm, Elliott Management, have done in this country and to this country. Over the past couple of decades, Elliott Management has made billions by buying large stakes in American companies, then firing workers, driving up short-term share prices, and in some cases taking government bailouts, insult to injury. Tonight we want to tell you a little more about how Paul Singer does business. The story begins in a small town called Sidney, Nebraska, population 6,282. 2 hours outside Denver, Sidney is the longtime home of the sporting goods retailer Cabela's, which sells fishing and hunting gear. In October of 2015, Singer's hedge fund disclosed an 11% stake in Cabela's and set about pushing the board to sell the company. Now, at the time, Cabela's was a relatively healthy company. It was posting nearly $2 billion a year in gross profits off $4 billion in revenue. There didn't seem to be any immediate need to sell. But Cabela's sold anyway after being pushed. Within a week, literally a week, Paul Singer cashed out. His hedge fund made at least $90 million up front and likely more over time. But in Sidney, Nebraska, it was a very different story. The residents of Sidney did not get rich. Oh no, just the opposite. Their community was devastated, destroyed. The town lost nearly 2,000 jobs. A heartbreakingly familiar cascade began. People left, property values collapsed, and then people couldn't leave. They were trapped there. One of the last thriving small towns in this country went under. Well, some countries, including the United Kingdom, have banned this kind of behavior. It bears no resemblance whatsoever to the capitalism we were promised in school. It creates nothing It destroys entire cities. It couldn't be uglier or more destructive. So why is it still allowed in the United States? The short answer, because people like Paul Singer have tremendous influence over our political process. Ben Sasse is the U.S. Senator who represents the state of Nebraska. Sydney, of course, isn't that large. But you might think the death of a town in his state would be of concern to Ben Sasse, again, U.S. Senator from Nebraska. But so far, it doesn't seem like he's ever commented on what's happened to Sydney. We looked hard. Then we called Sasse's office to see if they could point to a time where he commented on the destruction of Sydney or simply supply a statement to us about what happened there. But Ben Sasse's office didn't even respond to our producers. Oh, that's odd. But then here's one possible explanation for that. During his Senate run, Ben Sasse received the largest possible donation from Paul Singer. Singer himself was the second largest donor to the Republican Party in 2016. He's given millions to a super PAC that supports Republican senators. You may never have heard of Paul Singer, which tells you a lot in itself, but in Washington, he is rock star famous. And that may be why he's almost certainly paying a lower effective tax rate than your average fireman. Just in case you're still wondering if our system is rigged. Oh yeah, it is.
Interpol's anti-corruption unit plays an essential role for our 190 member countries in the area of anti-corruption, crimes in sports, and asset recovery.
As a response to the internalization of asset movement, Interpol hosts the Global Focal Point platform as a network of anti-corruption and asset recovery practitioners.
The Global Focal Point platform does not replace the mutual legal assistance, but is just an instrument to facilitate the sharing of sensitive information among the anti-corruption experts. As per today, more than 100 Interpol member countries and more than 200 focal points have joined the initiative.
Furthermore, the anti-corruption unit actively supports capacity building in the framework of the Global Program on Anti-Corruption, Financial Crime and Asset Recovery.
The program was launched in 2012 and has led to the training of over 600 anti-corruption investigators and prosecutors. The knowledge that have been gained from these our global programs by participants have been shared with other investigators and officials in their home agencies and countries. And these have translated into improved coordination of anti-corruption investigations and resultant recovery of stolen assets.
Taking financial resources away from criminals is a main tool to sustainably fight organized criminal networks. But the seizure of assets can be very challenging for investigators as technological development and innovation facilitates the moving of financial assets around the globe.
In the modern era, corruption and financial crimes are interwoven. In almost every corruption investigation, there's some aspect of financial crime, such as money laundering. Following the flow of illicit funds and eventually seizing those funds is critical in suppressing any criminal network.
These crimes are committed in a syndicated, sophisticated, and transnational manner. In some cases, the victims are deceived to disclose their personal data, which will eventually lead to financial loss. Financial Crimes Unit will continue working hand in hand with all member countries to fight against transnational social engineering fraud.
One of the major aspects of almost every criminal network is the ability to mask suspects' true identity, whether that's counterfeiting security documents or other means.
The Counterfeit Currency and Security Documents Branch provides forensic and operational support to law enforcement agencies investigating counterfeit currency and document fraud. One important initiative is Project Sprint that brings together the law enforcement community and security printing industry.
The goal of Project Esprint is to prevent organized criminal networks from sourcing the equipment and materials that could be misused for counterfeiting.
In addition, a major part of the anti-corruption unit works on protecting the integrity of sports. One focus is on match fixing and another focus on performance-enhancing drugs, generally known as doping.
Today, Interpol remains the only international law enforcement organization dealing specifically with doping of both professional athletes and amateurs.
It's about protecting the integrity of public authorities, the private sector, and sports competition. It therefore aims at protecting the trust in the societies of Interpol's member countries.